Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissick and Dana Gentry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissick.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
Hey, Dana, before we get started, what's new with you?
Oh my goodness. I just was talking about, I've just been kind of trying to get it together today, which is like my every weekend, but I have the funniest thing I have to tell you. So I've told you about my car. I've had my whole thing with my car.
Yes.
So I still don't have my car back. Okay. But in my Escalade, I have Wi-Fi. And so I've always, used it when I'm in the car and all that stuff. And it's called Gentry Wi-Fi. So I have lived where I live. You're going to die. I have lived where I've lived here for, I guess, about 2 years. I moved in here about 2 years ago. So I've always had kind of a little bit of internet problems, not totally, but it kind of goes in and out. So I would call Spectrum and they would come, or whatever. So for the last about 6 weeks, I've had no internet. We cannot get internet. Sarah stayed here the whole time I was gone for Christmas, and she said that she couldn't watch TV. She kept having to get on her hotspot. So we called them. They sent a signal. They said we show that it's working. We upped the thing or whatever from 100 whatever to 400 whatever. So long story short, I haven't even been able to I really wanted to watch the Titans game today, and I haven't even been able to watch TV because the internet, it's been horrible. So I had Spectrum make an emergency visit today on a Sunday because I was just fed up. This guy comes here, he goes right to my modem, and he said, so your Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi Spectrum 1A, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, my Wi-Fi is Gentry Wi-Fi. And he's like, And so he's looking at the back and he's calling and he can't figure it out. And he comes back and he's like, we have no Gentry Wi-Fi. And I'm like, no, that's my Wi-Fi for the house. And he's like, no, this is your Wi-Fi for the house. Long story short, since I moved in here, I've been using the Wi-Fi from my Escalade
car. Oh my God.
In the house. Linda. So literally, because I haven't had my car for 6 weeks, we thought that we haven't had internet here at the house. So he had this whole, I've been paying for this premium, whatever speed internet with some password and log on that I've never even known about for 2 years.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
I mean, I called Adam. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. So now I
That
feel
might be the ultimate of blonde moments. You're gonna
I'm like, I just saw Gentry Wi-Fi, and I'm like, well, there it is. And
has to be. It's got my name on it.
That has to be it, right? No, it's clearly. So I'm like, I cannot. Of course, that would only happen to me. So the good news is we got it fixed. The bad news is I've been having this internet for 2 years. I wasn't even using.
Oh Lord. I was fixing to get on Spectrum and say it's got to be Spectrum. It's got to be.
I know. Well, and I was getting ready to switch to that fiber. We just got the fiber, whatever, in my neighborhood, and I was like, I'm just gonna have to leave Spectrum alone and go to the fiber. The guy's like, no, I think you just need to not use your vehicle's Wi-Fi when you're in the house. I'm like, that would be a great start.
That's great. I love it. Well, that just goes to show proof that if you can't even figure out which internet you are and you still do a podcast, amazing things can happen if you just try.
That's right.
Although if they could see us most of the time before we do this podcast, the struggle we have finding our headphones and making them work.
Oh my gosh.
All kinds of crazy stuff. But anyway, we're tenacious and we're going to stick with it.
That's right. Did you go to San Diego?
I did for a very quick trip. It was just literally got there Friday, came home this morning. It was just enough to whet my appetite and make me want to stay. But it was awesome. We have some remodels and we're picking new paints and we got that done, and we'll go back in a week or two and spend more time before family reunion. But anyway, so I think we're going to answer a listener's question today, or concern or comment or challenge. So why don't you kind of tell us what we got on the agenda today?
Yeah, so we've been getting a lot of really good questions this month, and I thought this one was really good. So this listener sent in an email or an Instagram message actually, and said, what would be your best advice, or how can you help me with overcoming self-doubt? I feel like I get rid of it and then sometimes it creeps back in. But how would you guys overcome self-doubt? So I thought that would be a good one for us to talk about.
I love it. Because I really think self-doubt is something that we all have. Yeah. First of all. And I think the old saying that I used to like to always say is don't compare your insides to someone else's outsides.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is we walk around, and I think Facebook, Instagram, all those things are making it worse.
Yeah.
And I think self-doubt comes when we do two things. We have an unrealistic or an ideal vision of something that we might not ever be able to live up to. And so we kind of live in that space where we're never living up to that. Or number two, we're comparing. Anytime, most of our life, we compare to what we think we see in other people's lives. We compare to what looks easier for other people. And so I think about self-doubt. We also call them limiting beliefs, mooring lines of what they've been known. And I think everybody has them. I've only heard of one gentleman, and I was trying to think what his name was, out of Waco, Texas. Someone said they heard him say one time that he had never had a limiting belief. I would have loved to have met that man. But I've met a lot of successful people, and I think we all have them. And I don't think we need to walk around and think our doubts or our limiting beliefs are any different than anyone else's. I think what we need to realize is some people are succeeding in spite of those doubts and in spite of those limiting beliefs. And so just recognize that everyone has them, even the person that looks the most perfect on the outside or is nailing whatever it is you're trying to succeed at. And then I think you have to learn to manage them and not necessarily expect them to go away completely. And they may never go away. So I think they change over time. I do think over the years, I've probably gotten less of them. Maybe not. But I think part of one way you get rid of those is consistently be in growth mindset.
Yep. And
think about the way you're thinking, because if that's what you're always thinking about is those doubts and those limiting beliefs, then I think our brain finds what we're looking for, right? So a quick story, we had an agent in our strategy room the other day, and she was really struggling. One of the things that she mentioned was, she said, I feel like the world, she's a single person, and she said, I feel like the world is shaped up for the married person. And my thought to her was, and my comment to her was, well, don't you think you find what it is you're looking for, right? So we're going to find whatever it is we're looking for. So if we want to support, if we believe that, then we're going to find things that support that belief. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
And but on the other hand, I bet we could find hundreds of other people who are single people who are succeeding at a super high level. So I think everything begins in our mind. So this is such an important topic because everything begins in our mind. But I also think it's unrealistic to think that successful people don't have self-doubt, and you do. I think everybody has it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually had a kind of a cool story that went right along with this. So last week, I did a retreat with our top agents, our ALC, in the Columbus office. And one of my friends, his name is Matt ONeill. He is like the teeters back and forth always between the number one and the number two agent in the entire state of South Carolina. His team did $225 million last year. Wow. And he's just a great, incredible leader. So I had him Zoom in to speak to our people. And what he talked about, and he said, I just told him, talk about whatever you think would bring them value. Like, we didn't have a preset agenda. So he got on and he said, what I really would like to talk to you guys about is not the systems that I, took to get to 225 million last year, but more about the state that I've had to get my mindset in over the last 5 years to even be able to think about doing that and then to sustain that. And so he started by telling everybody that 80% of everyone's success is your state, your emotions, and your mindset. And he walked us through this exercise, which I'll share. But he shared a story first. And I thought this was so cool because it had just happened. So what he was going to do on the for the retreat for us, he ended up switching because he said he had posted a comment, or he had made a post on Instagram or Facebook. I can't remember what it was, the day before. Like, pretty much, I can't remember exactly what the post was, but it was something saying like, congratulations to his team, what a great year they'd had last year. And somebody that he knows that actually lives like 2 blocks down the street from him, who's a mortgage officer, commented and said, wow, you are such a narcissist. And he said instantly he had like just all of this self-doubt. And he said he was mean to his wife that day, that he had to leave the office. Like, it got him in a complete state of where he doesn't like to be, basically, just from reading that one comment. And so he said he went back to what he said he has a list, which I thought this was a great idea. He has a list of things that if he gets in that state, like things that, he does and everyone should have that can kind of get them out of that. So like for one, it was saying gratitudes, talking with a mentor or a friend who can pull somebody out of that, exercising, listening to a podcast, whatever, because he said when you get in a state like that, it's like instantly creeps into your self-doubt. And so he said that right off the bat, he picked up the phone and called that guy. And of course he didn't answer, but he said, left him a message and said, hey, I wanted to talk to you about the comment that you left. I just have some questions, call me back. But long story short, he broke down into, he said that he went back and listened to a mentor that told him 4 questions whenever self-doubt starts to like creep into his head. And he said that the 4 questions are, number 1, is what I'm thinking the truth? Number 2, can I absolutely know with 100% certainty that it is true? To which the answer would always be no, because whatever that guy thought when he left that comment, Matt thought his own thing. Like he created that story in his head. And then number 3 was, how do I feel or how do I react? And who am I when I believe that thought? And then number 4 was, who would you be if it were impossible to believe this thought ever again? And so the whole thing was cool because he just talked about how you can be any level of leader, any level of production, any level of anything, but everybody has self-doubt. And whether it's because somebody made some stupid comment or whether it's because we believe something from when we were like in our childhood or whatever that looks like. But I love those questions because he said, when you really break it down and think about it, is what I'm thinking the truth? And do I 100% can I 100% be certain that it is the truth? The answer is always no. So we get that because we create the story in our head. And he said, every problem is our own thoughts and every solution is our own thoughts. And I was like, man, that's so true.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And one of my favorite books is called Dream Giver by Jeff Wilkinson. And it's great for kids. And I've probably said this before, but even like toddler kids could start listening to this parable. It talks about a guy who lived in the land of ordinary and he wanted to be somebody, but there were all these naysayers. And, sometimes the biggest naysayer is our own self-talk, our own thoughts around it. And so what he talks about in the book is, they're coming from their fear. So even if it's like your family saying, well, why would you want to do that? Or why do you want to take that risk? Or why would you want to try to build that big of, business or whatever? They're coming from their beliefs and their fears. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you have to ask yourself, what's my fear under that doubt? Because usually there's fear under those kind of things. And so I love Dream Giver for that reason, because it's a great reminder that you're going to live in a land where there's going to be naysayers, and, that should never let you stop whatever it is you're dreaming or wanting for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that also I thought was so good that came from, and you've talked about Byron Katie.
Yeah. Byron. She used to be a realtor, believe it or not. And then she had a mental break or something. And when she was all better, she became this amazing person that helps people with exactly that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so he shared something from one of her books that I thought was like one of the coolest. It's the book called Loving What Is. And I haven't read that yet, but I need to get it and add it to my list. But she shares in that book 3 things that you can ask. 3 steps for when you have self-doubt or when your mindset gets in that weird state or whatever that you can do. And so step number 1 is say the opposite. So like, okay, if you get in, for example, let's say that an agent leaves your team. This was the example that he gave, that you have a mega team and you've worked with this person, you've trained them, they've been with you for years, and then they leave your team and they go out and sell their own, and you feel betrayed. So the first step would be to say the opposite. So like, for example, instead of he betrayed me because he left my team, you would say, no, I betrayed him. And then you keep going and list 2 more things. I took them for granted. I didn't ask them what they really wanted. And then you take it to the step number 2, which instead of saying they betrayed me, you would say, no, I betrayed myself. So, I let my emotions get in the way, or I created a story in my head, or I spoke to someone bad because of whatever. And then the third thing is you would say they didn't betray me. So you would turn it around on them. So you would say they maybe left the team because that was what was best for them in their life. It was never meant for us to work together, or there was a bigger purpose that was supposed to come out of that. It's like you learn how to switch your mind so that when you get in that self-doubt state, or when something happens, a specific incident that starts to leave you with self-doubt, you can kind of switch it. And I know, man, that's got to take a ton of practice.
No kidding. Yeah, a lot of his stuff does sound like Byron Katie stuff. And she's really good around that arena. But something that kind of just popped up with me is I think the scarier your commitment you're trying to make, you know, our body, our whole body or whatever is designed to try to protect us. So if you really think about it, the minute we start having big dreams and big goals, you know, you would think that the automatic mechanism is for our own self to try to protect ourselves, right?
Yep.
I think the scarier the commitment, the more limiting beliefs and the more self-doubt we're going to have. And that's all the more reason why we should just go ahead and do the thing, right? You know, my 4 C's, where you make the commitment and it's scary and you pee your pants and then you just go ahead and do it anyway with the wet pants. I think the self-doubt and all the limiting beliefs that's kind of along those same lines. I think the bigger we try to make our lives, the more we're going to have, you know, self-doubt and limiting beliefs and mooring lines that are going to pop up to try to protect us from whatever it is, you know, that might happen. But I think that's probably also a clue that's even more important that we go ahead and manage those fears, because I don't think it's unrealistic to expect that, oh, I'll wait till they go away and then I'll do the thing, because I don't think they're ever going to go away. I think I love that you do. And, you know, one of the things, Dr. Fred Gross that we worked with, he was a business psychotherapist for years that worked with the top 0.25% of producers in any industry. And he did it with the real estate industry. And in our masterminds, he would say, you know, there's a place that we get that's called, you know, like a funk that you get in, where your mind's just working against you constantly, you know, in self-sabotage and things like that. So he would always say, you know, alert people around you to recognize those signals, and have one person that you can call that who's either somebody on your team or your spouse alerts them that you kind of think you're in that little funky spot. And
I love that.
Yeah. And then, you know, the thing he would do with us is he would start having you talk about the accomplishments and things that you have done, you know, and you'd almost feel ridiculous when you would start doing that, because you would say, oh gosh, it's ridiculous that I even worry that I can't do that. Right. I mean, look at what I've already accomplished. And so I think focusing on some of the things that you have accomplished, and maybe even thinking about, did I have self-doubt before I did that one? You know, were there limiting beliefs that popped up before I accomplished that? Well, probably so, but I went ahead and did it anyway. And there's a great book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's years and years ago I've read it, but it's along that same line, that just recognize that we're going to have fear, but just do it, go ahead and do it anyway. Because 99%, I used to tell this to my kids all the time, 99.9% of what you really worry about isn't going to happen exactly like you think it's going to happen. It just doesn't. You're building it up worse than your mind.
You know, my friend and partner Josh is here today listening to us do this, and he just texted me one of my favorite quotes. I cannot believe I didn't think about this, so I'm glad he did. But it's Craig Groeschel: what you think determines what you do, and what you do determines who you are. So feed your faith and starve your doubts, because there's no one that talks to you more in a day than yourself.
Yes.
That's so true. And it made me think of the one Tony Robbins says too: if you get in your head, you're dead.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. And I think even if, and I can't remember which word it is in the Bible that's there so many times about not fearing and not worrying and all those things. And what do we do instantly and immediately? We start fear, and we start to have fear, and we start to worry.
Yeah. So what are some of the things you would do when you start to get a little bit of self-doubt? Like, if we could give a couple of action items of things that, like, you know, quickly kind of pull you out of it.
You know, that's a great question. I look for things that motivate and give me hope. You know, I'm trying to think of some of my latest self-doubts, or I just ignore it and go away. So one of them that really haunts me is, because being where I am in life, as opposed to, you know, your journey and where you are, and probably a lot of our listeners, you know, I've gotten 30 years into this industry, and I am so blessed with all the success that I've had, and I've come so far, but I still I still have this yearning to do more and to accomplish more. And sometimes I feel bad about that. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
why should I, you know what I mean? And what I've learned is I think the badness feels with where people try to tie in how much more money can you need. But then on the flip side of it, I believe the more value you put in the world, you can't keep the money away. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so it's interesting because a lot of times people in, you know, that are entering the age where I'm entering, which we're not talking about my age, but they will start to do things like stop doing the work that they have, and they'll go do charity, and they'll go do, you know, community and all that stuff full time. And I just have to be honest, that doesn't sound good to me to go do that full time.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's moments when I feel bad about that, like that's supposed to be the way instead of my way. So I get around other people that think differently. So for example, one of the reasons I love Dan Sullivan so much is he believes retiring is just waiting to die or telling the universe you're ready to die. And so I can't hang around people who they think that's the correct way, and whether they intentionally do it or I do it to myself, make me feel bad about what's inside of me that's a flame that I can't put out. It's just there. And if I try to put it out, it'll flicker right back up. And so I find people that support what I'm wanting to accomplish, and that kind of helps the little doubt go little quieter or down. And then part of what I do is I just go ahead and do it anyway. If I really want to do it, I just do it anyway. And the doubt stays there until I've proven it wrong. And then once I've proven it wrong, it's like, well, it can't be there now, right? So I'm trying to think of another one that
that's a really good one, though.
You know, and people being smarter. I really have a tendency I remember this very vividly when Mike, the guy that's going to be on our podcast at the end of the month, I can never say his last name. I want to call him Mike, the Profit First Man.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I call him Profit First Mike.
Yeah, Profit First Mike. Okay, that's what we're going to call him. When he was standing up there, and I thought, I love that he has a system that he can help people, and it's such a simple system. And so there's a part of me that yearns to, and I've been working on this, putting this process in place because I have coaches and they all say the same thing. You know, you need to have a process, and you have a process, but it's not formulated. In other words, you have it because you're following it, but you haven't formulated it into a way where other people can follow it. So when Mike was standing up there talking, I had this little doubt that flicked up and said, oh, he's way smarter than me. I can't do, not that I want to do exactly what he does, but I do want to do similar to what he does, right? I want to help people have bigger, brighter futures. And I want them to plug the holes, especially real estate agents that we have that we are not paying attention to. And so I had that moment when I have felt like, oh, he's just way smarter, because some of his stuff is like real brainiac stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just have to say, and I talk to myself about it. I say, you know, Linda, okay, he's smart in a different way than you're smart, you know? So, I mean, even that, I remember vividly sitting in that chair. And then the other thing I do is I try to, on the same note, I try to get around people, because eventually if you're around someone long enough, you will say, good Lord, if they can do it, I know I can. You know what I mean? So the flip side of that is you'll find a way that you think, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. So I'll do one of those two things. I'll remember that I had it because it doesn't go away. But then I also think, well, but this flame won't go away either. So I'm not going to let that limiting belief or thought hold me back. So I did take Mike to dinner. And by the way, I do still think he's very smart. But I also think there's lots of things that I'm wiser at in other areas than him.
Yeah.
And so not comparing, but finding what I do believe are my gifts and my wisdom, and not comparing that he has this certain kind of smarts and I don't really like to have those and I don't have those kind of smarts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It actually, it reminds me of, I've heard so many times Craig Rochelle say that before he really became a pastor, he had a huge fear of speaking in front of people, but more than that, just like delivering a wrong message and all this stuff. So if you watch him preach, you can see this every single time. When he steps out on stage, before he steps out, he takes like a big ginormous step, and then he walks out onto the stage. And because as long as he's been doing this, still every single time he preaches, he does it because he's in his mind, he's taking a step out of the fear and going on. Isn't that so good? Yeah.
I love it. So yeah, I think, and I don't know I don't know where they come from or why that you have them, but I think everybody has them, and I think you just have to manage them. So I would look for ways to manage that fear and not expect it to not have it, and
Yep.
not expect that people who have accomplished whatever it is you're trying to accomplish haven't had similar limiting beliefs. And so if they have gone ahead and accomplished whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish with the fear, having the same fear or different fears, then so can you.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's funny because it is hard not to compare or not to think, when you're around different people and stuff like that. But it just reminds me too of I love the quote, and remember when you wanted what you currently have.
Yeah.
And so thinking about, like, I can think of so many times that I thought like that would never happen, and I had self-doubt around it. And then now I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just different. I don't know. It's a different thought.
But again, I think it goes back to, you got to ask yourself, am I comparing something to an ideal or dreamlike situation, an unrealistic situation, or an ideal in my mind, let's say, or am I comparing to someone else? I think those two things will always come up. And just as easily as I could compare to someone who I feel like has better strengths or talents or smarts or whatever, I could also, on the flip side, find someone who's just as successful, who I wouldn't necessarily, they started out with less tools in their toolbox. They started out with less education, whatever the case is. So I think we can all, again, whatever we're looking for, we can find. So we're looking for the wrong things if we're finding stuff to compare ourselves to, or an unrealistic or an ideal outcome that we've set ourselves up to feel like we can't accomplish.
Yep. I totally agree.
Okay, so we're about out of time. Is there any last thoughts you'd want to add to this? I think a lot of people struggle with it, and I think we probably had to ask many different ways, and so hopefully we answered that in a way that will help most people with their self-doubt.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's definitely something that everybody can use at some point. And I feel like it's different seasons. You may go through a long time where you don't have any self-doubt, and you're going to go through seasons where you do. But the only thing that I would add is to just remind everybody, like, you're running your race, so stay in your lane. And then also, I've had to get much better at this, but whenever the self-doubt kind of creeps in, if I will say, or really it's better if I write down gratefuls, I instantly will kind of snap myself out of it. I think, and then stop being afraid of what could go wrong and start being excited about what could go right.
Yeah, love that. Great advice, Dana. That's awesome. So just remember, if you have a question or a concern or a challenge that you're faced with, just submit it to us at info@everythinglifeandrealestate.com, and be sure and give us as much detail as you possibly can around your situation, so that we can help you in the best way that we can, by knowing most of the information that you can share with us. Because the more we know, the better we're going to be able to comment and help you on that situation, opportunity, or challenge that you're up against. And also, if you would want to give us a review, we'd love to have a review for the podcast. That would help us out a bunch. And then the biggest compliment that you can actually give Dana and I myself is to pass this on, the link on, to someone that you really care about, or someone else in the real estate industry that you think that could benefit from our podcast. So again, be sure and subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. We'd love to have a great review from you. And then the biggest compliment you can give is to pass our information on everything, #everythinglife and real estate, if you're following us on Instagram, and pass our link along so that someone else can listen to the podcast. Dana, I guess I will see you in a few days.
Oh yeah, I'll see you in Austin.
See you in Austin, and we'll have another great conversation.
That sounds good. I'll see you then.
Thanks, Dana.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.